How did it get started? In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the nations of Europe were competing for colonies around the world. The nations of Europe distrusted one another. They built up huge armies and navies for defense against their neighbors. The nations of Europe formed alliances with each other. They pledged to help their allies if their allies were attacked. In the summer of 1914, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist who did not want to see his small country taken over by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In response, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia, Serbia's ally, declared war on Austria-Hungary. Germany, an ally of Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia and France, Russia's ally. To attack France, the German army marched through Belgium, a neutral country. Angered by Germany's invasion of Belgium, Great Britain declared war on Germany. Other nations, and the colonies of those nations already mentioned, were dragged into the war through the alliance system. The result was World War I. The two sides of the war were the Central Powers and the Allies. The Central Powers consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, the Ottoman Empire, or Turkey, and other smaller countries. The Allies were Great Britain, France, Russia, and other smaller countries. Late in the war, Italy, and then in 1917 the United States, joined the Allies. How did the U.S. get involved? In 1914, soon after the war broke out, President Wilson declared the United States to be a neutral nation. We would not take sides. We believed it was our right, as a neutral nation, to trade with either side, but British warships stopped American merchant ships and seized cargoes bound for Germany. German submarines sank American merchant ships bound for Allied countries. We were more mad at Germany because they sank our ships without warning, a practice known as unrestricted submarine warfare. In 1915, a German submarine torpedoed and sank the Lusitania, a British passenger liner. Over 100 Americans were killed. For a while after this, the Germans held to their promise not to sink ships without warning. But in January 1917, the German government announced that it would return to the policy of unrestricted submarine warfare, and a number of U.S. merchant ships were sunk. On top of this came the Zimmermann telegram, sometimes called the Zimmermann Note. This was a secret message from the German Foreign Secretary Alfred von Zimmermann to the Mexican government. This message said that if the U.S. declared war on Germany, then Mexico should declare war on the U.S. In return, when the Allies were defeated, Germany would see that former Mexican territory in the American Southwest, Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, would be returned to Mexico. The message was intercepted by the British and given to the American government. Americans were mad that Germany was trying to get our neighbors to make war on us. So, in April 1917, President Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany. Congress voted for war, and the U.S. joined the Allies. How did we help? Immediately, the U.S. helped by sending food and supplies that the Allies badly needed. Soon after, the U.S. sent hundreds of thousands of soldiers to Europe. This army was known as the American Expeditionary Force, or AEF. It was commanded by General John J. Blackjack Pershing. With new American supplies and fresh American troops, the tide of battle soon turned against the Germans. What was World War I like? The dominant feature of World War I was trench warfare. Troops of both armies dug into the ground in positions almost impossible to take by frontal infantry charges. In between the trenches of both armies was no man's land. It was covered with barbed wire to slow enemy charges. It was blasted by artillery until it looked like the surface of the moon. More soldiers on both sides died of disease than were killed by the enemy. World War I saw the first uses of new and terrible weapons. These included machine guns, airplanes, poison gas, submarines, tanks, and the first use of liquid fire or flamethrowers. Throughout most of the war, both armies faced each other across the same few miles of land. It was a stalemate, with neither side able to gain an advantage. How did it end? The fighting of World War I ended on November 11, 1918, when officers of the German High Command signed an armistice. This was actually a surrender. They realized they were beaten, and they wanted to end the war before Allied armies invaded Germany. The actual Treaty of Peace was negotiated later. It was known as the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles forced Germany to accept responsibility for the entire war. It virtually destroyed the German military. No army was allowed, and only a very small navy. All German colonies were taken away. The German government was forced to pay reparations, money to pay for all damage done to the civilian population of the Allies and their property. This was an enormous sum, more than the Germans could possibly pay. It ruined the German economy. Germans were very bitter about the harsh terms of the treaty. They would want revenge later. The Treaty of Versailles did establish a League of Nations, an international organization that would work for world peace. All who signed the treaty were automatically members. Also as part of the treaty, the map of Europe was redrawn. New nations were created, such as Finland, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. Austria and Hungary were separated. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania were restored. The Polish Corridor, a narrow strip of land that gave Poland access to the Baltic Sea, divided Germany into two parts. How did the U.S. react to all this? President Woodrow Wilson had represented the U.S. at the peace talks. He did not really approve of the European plan for the treaty. He thought it was too harsh. Wilson had had his own plan, the 14 points, but it was too easy on Germany for the other Allied leaders. Wilson went along with the Treaty of Versailles in order to get the other Allied leaders to agree to the League of Nations, the one of his 14 points that he thought was the most important. However, in order to become official for the United States, the Treaty of Versailles had to be ratified by the United States Senate, part of our system of checks and balances. The Senate rejected the treaty. Some senators thought it was too harsh. Other senators, the isolationists, did not want to be tied up in European quarrels by membership in the League of Nations. They considered the League the type of entangling alliance the U.S. had always avoided. As a result, the United States never did join the League of Nations. And because the U.S. did not participate, the League never had any real power, and was unable to prevent another world war. Following World War I, the United States tried to return to a policy of isolationism, but it was too late. We had proven ourselves a world power. We could not escape the role in the future. From this point on, try as we might, the U.S. would take on an increasing role in world events.